Let us begin, chat. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. GG! Do you know why we call it Healthy Gamer GG? HGGG? Because it's good game. GG. How's everybody doing today? Yeah, huge props to all the people in our community, and I can't believe Alex's music is really bumping. Yeah, so it's really fantastic. So welcome everybody. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. Just a reminder that everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So if you all have a concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. So just a reminder that our Touch Grass challenge has been really, really awesome so far. So it's a photo challenge on Discord designed to get people out of the house and doing fun stuff. So you can submit images of yourselves, kind of like doing particular summer activities, get points, and win rewards during the month of July. So you can check out, let's take a quick look. Let me just make sure that, let's find it. Where's Touch Grass? I was looking at these, oh my God. Let's go. Where's Touch Grass? Dude, this Discord server is gigantic. There's like 80,000 people on here now. What? Study together. Fitness. It's all good, all good. Where's Touch Grass? I didn't see it. Am I on the right one? Hold on. No, oh, I'm in the Touch Grass channel. Lol. 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 Hold on, chat. Hold on. Dr. K will figure this out. I failed my IT check, despite my racial bonus. No, dude, I just can't, I literally cannot find the channel. I found it earlier. I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm in it. Content. Okay, there's a bunch of people waiting. Touch Grass. Here we go. Found it. All right, let's take a quick look. Let's go over here. Let's do this. Gotta click so many things. All right. So, join a meetup group. Awesome. Looks like people are socializing in person. Completed a 10K run. Pog. Completed meditate in the park. Go to a new restaurant or cafe. Observe your own shadow in the sun. Order your second favorite dish on the menu. That looks good. Try new cuisine. Fantastic. Touch sand. Go swimming. Touch grass. Go on a date with another person. Oh my goodness. Go swimming. Water a plant. Touch sand with both hands. Ooh. Watch a full Ask a Coach recording. Okay, that's interesting. Ah, I see it as Kent and Tech Teller. The PogChamps themselves. Do yoga in the park. Nice. Meditate in the park. Offer to take someone's pet for a walk. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that that was a thing. Watch the night sky. Take a cold shower. Oh my goodness. Sans nudity in the photo challenge. So, Touch Grass is super cool. Our community seems to love it. People seem to be having an absolute blast. Couple of interesting statistics. So there have been 6,500 submissions so far. Right? So that's awesome. So there have been 6,500 check boxes that have been checked. 9.2 million points have been earned by the community. And we actually have our winner, first winner, a winner. So I've been told I can show this on stream, but so, I guess Cartoline is our first, winner. So she's a 20-year-old artist based in Serbia. So shout out. Looks like she makes some really cool stuff. So she's going to get some merch, and our rewards for the Touchgrass Challenge include some of the merch that we have. I'm actually a big fan of like these hoodies. I haven't tried these on yet. I don't know if they're the same make, but these are actually like really soft and very comfortable, very warm. Yeah, I've been wearing these a lot. They're actually really fantastic and also reasonably priced. Like I got an American Giant hoodie like a couple years ago, like 6, 7, 8 years ago for like $120, and like these are just as good. So check that stuff out if y'all are interested. If y'all have participated in Touchgrass, huge props to you. Hopefully y'all are out there having fun, going on dates, meeting people, touching sand, touching grass, looking at the night sky, meditating in the park, doing yoga in the park, running 10K. Like that's what this community is about, right? So it's like, it's cool that we talk about stuff, and we're going to talk about some cool stuff today. We're going to talk about, we have a call-in stream today where people are going to be calling in and talking about what they want to work on. So we've got all that kind of good stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, sometimes we have to do more than just listen to someone talking on the internet. We got to do something ourselves, right? Touch computer challenge when? That's a good question. I don't know when we're going to do a touch computer challenge. So let's go ahead and hop in and we'll see what we've got today. All right. Yawn champ. Yo, can we test audio? Okay, awesome.
Yeah, just need to clarify. The winner was for the merch competition.
So that's the person that made merch for us.
Yes, featured on our merch store.
Got it. Okay, so she's an artist, actually. So thanks for sharing that, because I was confused because Touchgrass ends in July, right?
Yes.
So this is an artist that submitted merch to our merch store, and her designs are now featured on our merch store. Thank you very much for clarifying. Yep. I was kind of confused by that. So she made those designs.
Can you show people the dirt huts that people have made for Touchgrass?
The dirt pots?
The dirt huts. I'm going to send you.
I see water a plant.
Search what I DM'd you on Discord.
Search what I DM'd you on Discord. Okay. It's under events, right?
Just on the top right. Just paste that in the search bar.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, let me see if I can. Dirt hut. What is this?
So we have a 10,000 point objective to build a dirt hut in real life, and these are all the people who successfully did that.
It's not working. Hold on.
Oh no.
Do I have to type in? Oh, there we go.
Yes,
okay.
The whole thing.
Okay, whoa, this is wild. Hold on a second. So there's you said there's a 10,000 point objective?
Mm-hmm.
To
build a dirt hut.
To build a dirt hut. Wow. Dude, that's wild. What? People are actually building shelter in the wilderness? That's legit, dude. This is crazy. That's kind of weird. I don't know if that's dirt hut, but that's like people are building shelters. What is this? Are we preparing, or is our next challenge going to be preparing for the apocalypse? Chat?
Who knows?
All right, that's cool, dude. 10,000 points. Holy based. All right. Did you guys see that video about how most of those like primitive building channels are false? Did y'all see that? That was wild. If you guys haven't seen it. It was crazy. It's got like 10 million views in like 1 week, but it's such a good video. Okay, let's get started, Tech Teller.
All right.
And the topic today is, what do you want to work on? Is that right? Or what are you trying to change? Or what's the topic?
Yeah, the topic is really just what I want to improve on.
What do I want to improve on? Welcome, friend.
Yeah. Thank you.
And what do you go by?
I go by Josh underscore OW on Discord, but I mainly just go by Josh.
Okay. So Josh, what do you want to improve on?
Well, I want to improve on feeling proud of myself because whenever I work hard and do everything I can to work towards something and succeed, I don't feel proud of myself or my accomplishments or the effort that I even put into getting the end result. And so I thought that maybe I would someday just like wake up and feel happy and just ecstatic, incredible about knowing that I put in so much work and effort to accomplish something that mattered, but it just doesn't end up that way, whether I succeed or fail, and it just kind of feels empty to me.
Wow, that sounds tough, dude. So let me just make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So it sounds like you do put in effort, you work hard, and you don't always succeed, but sometimes you succeed.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure out. And so help me understand, how do you feel about yourself when you do succeed?
Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe whenever I succeed, because I actually managed to go out for runs and exercises sometimes, and even do my homework because I'm in college and all that. But even when I succeed and do all that, I guess I just kind of feel maybe it's more so content. I'm just like, okay, well, I guess I got that done. That's good. And now I just don't have to like stress about the rest of my day, knowing that I did something, I guess that was productive. But I don't really feel ecstatic about it.
I see.
Just kind of.
So what I'm hearing is that you kind of feel maybe relieved, like you don't have to worry about that anymore, but you don't feel any sense of pride.
Yeah.
Do you think what you've accomplished is noteworthy?
I think it has been noteworthy, yeah, because I mean it's like I I'm regularly working out, right? And I even go out for runs often, and that just has actually been kind of enjoyable to do, just the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, I don't know, I feel less stressed out during my days as a result, and then I'm able to have better control over doing the things that I know I need to do, but it just kind of um I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a big giant hallmark like I sometimes wish it would. As in, oh yeah, now I'm moving forward in my life. Now I'm doing it. I'm on the grind. It just doesn't feel maybe euphoric or as amazing as I thought it'd be.
Yeah, so I'm almost hearing that when you okay, let me make a couple of assumptions here, Josh, and you let me know if these are accurate. So the first is that prior to working out consistently, you sort of had this idea that if you started working out consistently, you would like feel really good about yourself. You're like, yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And now that you're doing it, you don't really feel the pride that you were expecting.
No. No.
Do you feel proud about anything?
I've been thinking about that question a little bit, but I wonder if I ever felt any sort of pride in my life at all. I mean, I don't know if it's anything like pride, but whenever that comes to mind, all I can think about are the times where I was part of something that I had to do with a whole group of people that I had to get to know. Like there was a time when I was in baseball and I was in junior leagues for that, and I just felt so. I guess I felt so alive whenever I was just with my teammates and I got to bond with them and practice with them and do scrimmages, and that just felt really. It just felt really invigorating. Like that was just a part of my life that I've been missing all along, was like camaraderie. But I guess I felt pride. Maybe I did feel pride more so just in what I was able to accomplish in terms of what my team accomplished, but not me. Because it wasn't about me. I just felt pride, I guess, maybe towards my team and the things that we were able to do and how far we were able to go. Things like that.
Okay, so I'm hearing that the only thing that you were able to take pride in was something that was a team effort. And even when you talk about the team effort, you almost purposely exclude yourself as a contributor.
Yeah, and the only time that I ever considered being a big part of that whole process was when they directly actually, because we had a championship game like at the very end of our league, and we ended up losing it like horrifically. We just got absolutely destroyed. But then we had a party or a get together afterwards to celebrate how far we came, and they gave me a whole trophy for just for how much I meant to them, for how much I meant to the team, and it's called the Heart Award, right? It's like a whole acronym about like having heart, endurance, attitude, respect, and team. And and they gave it to me last out of everyone else's trophies, and I remember that because I was like, man, I feel so appreciated, you know, because my efforts, my attitude actually meant something, you know, and it made a positive impact in their lives, and they really, and I was the heart and soul of the team. And knowing that, like I never felt that way during the season, but it was only at that moment afterwards when they gave me that award that I felt like I was just really, really happy. It just felt amazing.
Wow. How are you feeling sharing this story?
I mean, I'm just recalling like that moment. I mean, I just feel, I don't know, I just feel like, it just feels like bliss or happiness because then it just calls back to all the highs and lows that we've been through together and the things that we've done and just what we said and did and just what we went through and just how that all culminated into that moment where I got that trophy. It felt like it was worth it. It felt like that I that it was deserved or earned, and that just felt like that was the proper ending to an amazing story, I guess.
Sounds boss, dude. Sounds
Sure
like
was.
absolute boss. So let me ask you something. When Josh, can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing?
Yeah, of course. So generally, the way I understand it now is I was kind of brought up as a and treated as sort of a special or gifted kid, right? So I just grew up with me, my mom, my biological parents, of course, and one older brother. And I, I've always just been kind of like an introverted, kind of shy, but kind of kind kid, you know. And then I grew up as the years went on. My parents and teachers and other older adults or peers of mine would be like, "Man, Josh, you're just such a kind and smart kid. Like you're gonna be able to do great things, man." And then and then that just kept going on and on for years until especially I got into like junior high or high school when it felt like it was more of an insidious thing to me because I felt like my parents and all the other peers and adults that were around me telling me these great things, it just felt like I had to be the chosen one, right? I felt like I was like Anakin Skywalker, okay? And I had to be the one to be able to save the world and bring balance and just do all these great things because I was just so great, unlike anyone else, like the Avatar. And it felt like I had to just be that guy. And whenever I faced struggles and was human and failed and fell flat on my face, it just those times just absolutely decimated me mentally because I felt like I had to keep I had to keep people to believe keep people believing that I was the guy, that I was the chosen one. And then when I wasn't, I failed, then I was just who was I at that point? I'm just some loser going through high school doesn't know what they're doing with their life.
Okay. So it's,
and then it just
it sounds like you've been
fell apart.
carrying around a lot of expectation.
Yeah.
Now, so when you did
And
well, what did your mom, parents say, teachers say? Like, let's say like you're 8 years old and you get an A on a test. How do they respond?
I mean, pretty much the same way. They're like, "Oh, wow, Josh, like you made an A on the test. Like, man, you're so freaking good at like math or whatever. Like, you just like I'm so proud of you. I love you, man." And then I'm like, "Thanks,
And
I guess." And then I'm like,
how would
"Cool."
you feel?
Well, I would just feel like, "Oh, um, yeah, I guess I got 100 on it. Like, I guess that's something." And it's, yeah, whatever.
Okay. So,
Kinda it.
okay. Can I think for a second, Josh?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know how to feel pride?
I'm pretty sure I don't.
How do you understand that?
Probably because I never had an experience where I personally within my being feel and recognize what pride is even like, especially myself. It's just kind of like a foreign entity to me, I guess.
Yeah, so let's try to understand this, okay?
Yeah.
So let's start with this idea of being gifted. So what I'm kind of noticing is that, like, let's say getting 100 on a test is something that many people would be proud of. Whereas what I'm noticing is that, like, because you were kind of gifted, there was an expectation that you would do well. So even if you get 100 on the test, that's not something to be proud of. That's like baseline. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, it kind of like is tricky, because if we expect you to get 100, the most you can do is meet expectations. Sometimes you're going to fall short of expectations, but you can't really exceed expectations. And when we really think about, like, what are we proud of? We're not proud of doing average. We're proud of doing exceptional. But if your expectations are so high, how can you ever be exceptional?
Yeah.
Does that?
And I would like to add something tidbit that I think is really important as well, if you don't mind.
Please.
That whenever that complex became more of a thing whenever I was growing up in high school and junior high. Like even when I would fail, like my parents especially would be like, "Well, yeah, no worries, man. Like you failed, you can try again and you can do better." And even whenever they gave me that kind of feedback, it just kind of was too late, and it's cemented in my mind where I thought to myself, I put it on myself where I was like, "No, I need to be better. Like I need to be the chosen gifted one." Right? Even if everyone else says so, I don't think so.
How
I
did
felt
you
like I
how did you
done more.
feel when they said that?
I I don't know. I just maybe it depended on the situation, but either I was kind of like, yeah, I guess I failed, it's whatever, or I was just absolutely devastated and I beat myself up
And when your
for how I
parents
failed.
said, "It's okay, you can try again later," how did that make you feel?
It just made me feel like an absolute like a failure. Like I just
So it's kind of interesting,
like
right?
that like that was
Because your parents are saying things that should be encouraging, but what effect does it have on you?
not a positive one. Just kind of
Yeah, like, how do you
no effect
understand that?
really.
Like, so okay, your kid does poorly, right? So you're a parent and you say, "It's okay, you can try again." How do you understand, like, how does that make a child feel worse?
You know, that's a good question. I I'm not really sure I even have the answer to that,
Is
really.
that how you felt?
Well, yeah, it was.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's kind of weird. So, Josh, I think there's I think we can sort of sort this out. First of all, sorry, I don't mean to laugh because your situation is serious, but I think that there's like a couple of interesting things going on. And I think a lot of it has to do with expectation. So oftentimes as gifted kids, when you grow up, like you're given all these expectations, right? And you internalize these expectations. Like, I'm supposed to do really well. And it's kind of weird, but oddly enough, your parents were dismissive of your shame. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that feel accurate to you?
I think so. Yeah, because they never really,
Right. So I know it sounds kind of weird because when we think about parents, we think about like, oh, like isn't dismissing shame a bad thing? I mean, isn't it a good thing? Like, don't we like not want, like, if our kid does poorly, like, don't I want to encourage him and like help him not feel shame anymore? So the interesting thing there is I'm sort of noticing that like in your upbringing, you were kind of like not allowed the range of success, right? So even when you failed, they sort of dismissed that. And then like, even when you succeeded, that was sort of expected. So I'm sort of noticing that I almost think about shame and pride as two sides of the same coin. Like, in order to be ashamed of something, like, you know, you can be proud of the same things that you could be ashamed of. If you did well, like, you can maybe be proud of that. If you did poorly, like, you can feel ashamed of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're like kind of like the same, like on the same spectrum, but just at opposite ends of the spectrum, like shame and pride. With me? So, so the really interesting thing here is that I think it's kind of interesting that they dismissed your shame and they tried to like help you feel better about yourself. But somewhere along the way, I think they just sort of like started communicating on a level that you were just not on. Like, I don't mean that they were above you or below you. I just mean that y'all were like operating on different wavelengths in terms of like achievement and lack of achievement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I imagine it's actually quite confusing for a child to grow up in that situation. So like, let me just put it to you this way. Like, if I do poorly on a test and my parents are like, it's okay, there's no problem with that, you'll be fine because you're so smart. It's kind of weird because what they're telling me doesn't actually mirror like reality, right? Like, if I did poorly, like, they're not saying, hey, you did poorly, you know, you should really like think about trying better next time, or like, let's think about what you could have done better. Does that make sense? Like, they're not saying that. They're sort of like even when you do poorly, they're not like validating the fact that you did poorly. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of swept to the wayside.
Exactly.
So
right.
I would say it is. Yeah.
And then even in periods of time when you should be proud, right? And your parents are like, they're giving you positive feedback. But like, the thing is, you have high expectations on yourself, and also the feedback they give you when you're doing well and the feedback they give you when you're doing poorly actually seems kind of the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? And so like, I don't know if this is kind of, if I'm making sense here, but it's sort of weird because like, as a child, if they're saying, oh, you're so smart, everything will be fine when you do well, and oh, you're so smart, everything will be fine when you do poorly, it's like, how does that child learn what to be proud of and what to be ashamed of? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just confusing. You get the same thing either way.
Exactly. Right? It's confusing. Like you're getting the same thing every way. And so what I think may have actually happened is like, I don't know that you were like, you know how to feel proud. I mean, you do, and we'll get there in a second. But the first thing that I want to share with you is I don't think that this is like, it's sort of like you can't learn the right way to feel because no matter what happens, you're being given the same feedback. So your mind has not learned how to sort of differentiate between like pride and shame. Does that, I mean, I hear that you know how to feel shame and you know how to feel pride. So like, but is this sort of resonating with you, or you think I'm kind of like in the wrong ballpark?
I think that's actually pretty accurate. Yeah.
So what I'm sort of hearing from you is that like you don't know how to feel pride. And I know it sounds kind of weird because normally we're actually like taught how to feel pride. And a key thing about how to feel proud is like, even if I'm going to kind of give you an example, which is like, let's say that I'm an overly optimistic, protective parent. Like I'm a helicopter parent who thinks that my child is Jesus Christ reincarnated. Plus with the spirituality of Jesus Christ, with the mind of Stephen Hawking, and the physical form of, let's say, Michael Phelps. Okay, if you know who those people are.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like I have the uber child, the most amazing child in the world. And I am constantly telling that child, you're amazing, you're amazing, you're perfect, you're amazing, everyone, you're just the best thing ever. How do you think that child feels about themselves?
I mean, they'd be like, yeah, that's just my bottom line. Like, yeah, I guess I'm just amazing.
Right. So like they're going to grow up sort of feeling amazing about themselves, but if you really like think about those kids, they actually have they're very insecure. Right? I don't know if you've known kids like this, but like kids who are grow up in a situation where their parents are like overly supportive, they're like very easily threatened and like become insecure very easily. Oftentimes they'll grow up as bullies. I don't know if you've had like any, is this kind of make it, have you known people like that? Maybe you are someone like that, but, and it's sort of like just providing overwhelming positive feedback without any kind of like negative correction does not raise like a healthy amount of pride and self-confidence in a child. It raises things like arrogance. And underneath the arrogance is insecurity. Like my point here is that when children aren't given both sides of the coin, and I think that's what sort of happened with you, you sort of like, I don't get the sense that you even know what to be proud of because you have like such high expectations of yourself, and like people haven't oddly enough even validated when you did poorly. And this sort of results in something that's kind of interesting, which is, why do you think you felt so much pride by getting the Hart Trophy?
Because whenever I was with that team, and it's a whole sport where you have to rely on your teammates. You can't just do everything yourself. And then whenever an outside party like that and people you get to know and trust just openly just accept you for who you are and then reward you for that, then it just felt amazing because I was accepted, and they know that I failed as well because we all did. Like we were all there together, and no matter what, like we still stuck together as a team, and that couldn't be said. I even remember that couldn't be said for most teams that were in that same league at the time. Like even my best friend's like mom, who my best friend was also in baseball at the time doing the same thing. Like even his team apparently didn't have that kind of like bond or synergy that my team had.
So I think there are a couple of other important elements there, right? So one is, as you mentioned, the acceptance despite the failure. So this is kind of interesting because that kind of sidesteps expectation. Does that make sense? Like, because your mind has come to expect particular things. And so when you get praised for something, and the other thing is like, you haven't been praised your entire life for being the heart and soul of other people. You've been praised for being gifted. And so like, what is it like to get praise in an area where you didn't think that's something you were capable of? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So, because what I'm noticing is that what really feels very like what you can take pride in is actually things that were free from your expectations. It's when other human beings saw value in you in a way that you did not expect value from yourself.
No. Definitely.
So, do you have any thoughts about how to approach this?
You know, and I have to preface, I really do love Healthy Gamer, and I've watched so many of their VODs and streams. It's a wonderful place. But what would come to mind for me, I don't know, is just somehow free myself from those kinds of expectations. But I don't really know how to apply something like that to my situation. It just
makes perfect sense. I think it's challenging.
Yeah.
I think you've got the right answer, and we're going to help you with the how. Okay. So the first thing is that, as you mentioned, so I think a lot of this has to do with expectations, because the problem is the expectations you put on yourself make it so that you've got two options. You can, where perfection is the bare minimum, right? Which is like, how can you ever feel proud if perfection gets you sort of a bare minimum pat on the back? And then you can also fall short. So there are a couple of different things. I think what we can try to do is rectify a lot of like what you've missed out on. So interestingly enough, the first thing that we could try to do is have a place that validates your shame. I know it sounds kind of weird, right? So like practically finding some kind of friend, or I don't know if you're in mental health treatment or you're working with a coach or whatever, but like, I think, I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, I think one thing that's missing here is that if we kind of assume that this is like, your brain doesn't really know what pride feels like, I think a key part of that is in helping validate actually when you do poorly. The interesting thing is that when we validate, okay, Josh, you didn't do a great job here, and you really could do better, and I want you to work like extra hard if you're willing to, and then like give it another shot. If someone said that to you and you actually gave it another shot and you succeeded, how do you think you would feel about yourself?
I think I may actually feel more pride in myself.
100%, right? And why is that?
Because they knew what I went through and the failures that I had experienced in order to eventually try again and then succeed.
Absolutely, right? Because then your effort means something. Like before when they're like, oh, you'll get it. Like, no big deal. Oh, it's fine. You got this. Easy. Easy clap. And then it's like, even if you work your ass off, it's like they expected it to be easy for you. So there's no acknowledgement of your effort. And so like, if there's no acknowledgement of your effort, if no one else recognizes the effort that you're putting in all this effort, and everyone else is like, by the way, this should be easy, bro, because you're so gifted. Then when you succeed, it's like, what am I supposed to? It was so hard for me to accomplish what everyone else is saying is easy. How on earth am I supposed to take pride in this? Tell me.
I can't.
Absolutely. You work out every day. Or you work out a lot consistently, you said. You go running.
Yeah.
Is this an achievement?
This is kind of like, like that cool.
Is it hard for you to do that?
Well, yeah, to just force myself to get out and do something instead of like playing games or whatever. Like, it's not an easy thing to do.
Okay. So like, that's what I want you to focus on, right? So I know it sounds kind of weird, but validate. You can start by validating how hard some of these things are for you. You can validate how a year ago or 2 years ago, like, you weren't doing this every day. So that's number one. Second thing is if you want to let go of expectations, I think, especially if you can do this in the community, I think you've got to open yourself up to feedback in dimensions that you're not gifted. Now, this can be a little bit tricky, but like, I don't know, like I think heart and soul is beautiful because it's like the kind of thing that you didn't expect from yourself, right? So one thing is you can let go of your expectations. We'll get to that in a second. Or what you can do is start operating in areas where your expectations don't apply. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, that's a little bit tricky. Like, what is that? And that's where I'd say, like, if you're viewing yourself as a gifted kid, then I would really do stuff that's like a little bit more like volunteer oriented or charitable, because I think those are the kinds of places where I'm not hearing that someone said that, you are an amazing human being all the time and all this kind of stuff. So I'd say that like, you don't have to let go of your expectations. You can just operate in places outside of them. And we already have evidence of that, right? So we know that when there's a community endeavor where people can value you, like in a way that you don't necessarily value yourself, that's what's going to make you feel proud. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they wouldn't be expecting that from me.
And more importantly, you're not expecting it from you.
Yeah.
Right?
That too.
So like operate in places that are free from expectation. So I'd say very, very concretely, if it's community oriented, I think that's ideal. It sounds like you're in college. So like, I think if you want to do some volunteer work or something like that, like go work at a homeless shelter, go work at an animal shelter, like go and do something where you're just trying to make the world a better place. Like you're just going to go and try to like help people that you care about. And I think that would actually hopefully help. But that's kind of tricky because you have to like, don't go in with too much expectation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you gotta be a little bit careful. And then the last thing in terms of letting go of expectation, I think that's where you really have to like probably do some more deeper work. So I'd say like start with number 1 and number 2, which is pretty easy, which is like, first of all, have people validate your struggles or even your shame, right? So that's going to be really, really important. And then the cool thing is if they can validate your struggles and your shame, like then you can feel proud. Like it's kind of weird. Second thing is do some community is in have groups of people, and then also something that like you're not expecting a lot from yourself. So I would not suggest that you go and maybe you can, maybe something like if you're like a math tutor, but like, you know, try to steer clear of like intellectual activities where just ask yourself, if I did a good job at this, would that be the bare minimum? Like, is that what I expect? Or could I actually take pride in this? Kind of just ask yourself, right? Like, do I view myself as gifted in this way? And if the answer is no, then you should move towards that activity. The tricky thing here that you have got to watch out for is that oftentimes gifted kids avoid the things that they're not gifted in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can you explain it a little bit or how you understand it?
Well, yeah, because if I like on some consciousness or unconscious level just understand that I look at something and think, oh man, I'm really going to suck at that. Like, I don't want to do that because I'm going to suck at it. Then I don't want to be viewed as or view myself as being a loser in that.
Perfect.
Then I'll feel bad.
Perfect, right? So that's where I think the antidote there is that, you know, the reason that you're volunteering, let's say, is not, you don't really care about, I mean, you will care. There's a part of your mind, your ego will care about how you're perceived, but you're going to go there to like try to make another human being's life a little bit better for like one day at a time. Does that kind of make sense? So I want you to kind of let go of yourself a little bit and like go and do something that you can take pride in, but you're really there to help someone else. It's not really about your self-image. So that's going to be like one tip that you can sort of use to try to do things outside of your comfort zone. And then the last thing is letting go of expectations, which is where I think, like I mentioned, you need to do a little bit of deeper work where you've really got to start to ask yourself, you know, like, when did I start to view myself as gifted? What impact has it had on me? You know, potentially even have a conversation with your parents about, you know, how like actually you've struggled a fair amount and like it's been hard for you to hear that everything is going to be okay because sometimes things actually weren't okay. Right? And like what I'm really hearing from you is that lots of people told you that things were going to be okay when actually you were struggling. And that sounds incredibly isolating to me. That sounds to me like you really were not seen at all. And in fact, what was happening is people were conjuring an image of what they thought you to be instead of actually seeing who you are. How does that sit with you?
Yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And so the way to let go of expectations is to really sit with, you know, Josh, what is the image of you and who are you? And if you're open, we can give that a stab now, but, you know, I'm not expecting a whole lot because it's a complicated question. Usually this is the kind of question that I would ask after someone had done weeks or months of work. But do you want to try answering that now, or you want to just sort of work on that kind of on your own?
Oh, I'm absolutely down to it now.
So let me ask you, what is the image of Josh?
Well, I guess Josh is just some dude that's out there somehow trying to make, or that wants to somehow try and make the world a better place, I guess. You know?
Is that the image that other people see?
Nope.
What do
Not
other
really.
people see?
I guess they're more like, oh yeah, it's just some other dude named Josh. Like I guess he seems like he might know what he's doing. And he seems like a pretty insightful or smart guy. Like, yeah.
Okay, so when they look at you, they see someone who's insightful, capable.
Yeah.
Does the Josh, when they see this is hopefully a good example, when they see Josh working out consistently, do they think that Josh struggles to work out, or do they think he's highly motivated?
Well, they would probably think that I'm just disciplined. It's easy.
Right? So the image of Josh is insightful, capable, disciplined, gifted. And what is it like to actually be Josh?
It's like, man, I really want to play Overwatch, but man, I got homework to do. Let's do it like 12. All right, I guess I'll go and do problems or something. Gosh.
Josh, are you smiling right now?
Yeah, because that's actually my situation right now.
And how does it
I
feel?
got work to do, and I'm eventually going to do it.
How does it feel to be that person?
It just feels kind of funny to think that I'm like a balloon, like a bumbling buffoon, just being like, "Oh, stop it! No, gotta get the okay. Let's get to the work." You know, just bumbling around until I get to where I need to go.
Yeah. Right? And so let me ask you,
Yeah.
who deserves to take more pride? The bumbling balloon who like struggles with themselves and eventually floats in the right direction, right? Bounces themselves towards working out and doing homework and stuff like that? Or someone who's like, oh, Josh, this new fragrance by Josh makes you insightful, capable, disciplined.
Yeah, no, definitely the balloon guy.
Right.
Because he's just trolling, you know? Like, he doesn't care. He's doing whatever.
So, I mean, hopefully that helps you some, but I think that just like sit with those two images and recognize that like, actually, you may not be as gifted as you think you are. And bizarrely, that may mean that you can take pride in what you've accomplished, because the truth of the matter is that your life, like, even though you have certain advantages, and we're not saying that you don't have advantages, there are like genuine things that you struggle with, right? And consistently working out means fighting 1,000 small battles with yourself and winning at those small battles. But man, like each inch of territory that you gain when fighting against yourself, like each inch you've paid for with sweat and blood and tears and Overwatch rating. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's like, not only do I work out, like I even like practice like some yoga in the morning. Like I get up at 4:30. I go to sleep at like 6, 7, wake up, and then immediately after I do that, I meditate and then study my class. You know, so I can get ahead and know what I'm doing. Even then, like sometimes it just doesn't. Those accomplishments don't really compound.
How do you feel about waking up at 4:30 in the morning? How does it actually, let me ask this. How does it feel to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, do yoga, start studying?
Well, it kind of sucks.
Yeah,
Because like,
man. Tell me about it.
I just want to sleep. Like I just want to sleep, and I look at my clock on my phone, like, oh, it's 4:32. All right, I guess I'll get out of bed, because otherwise I'm not gonna get food or whatever. I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Dude, it sounds
Feel
hard.
reluctant.
It sounds like you're trying to force yourself into building a better life for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Because like before, and this is a little personal, but it's not too graphic or anything. Like my grandpa recently, unfortunately, passed away, right? And then whenever I went to his funeral and I mourned for him, like everyone else may have just been feeling just sadness and grief and all that. Like I felt like a grief of a sort of sense of, and we're Christian, we're our family's like like Christian primarily and all that, and I was like thinking to myself, please God, just let me be a stronger person, you know, let me be more capable so I can actually make the world a better place and not let all these efforts that my grandpa or anyone else went through go to waste. Make it worth it.
Yeah, so I think it's can be healthy to ask for strength. And also, I would encourage you to recognize, Josh, that you've probably been given that which you've asked for. And the only thing that really gets in the way of seeing it is your own ego.
Yeah, probably.
So just spend some time with who the real Josh is versus the image of Josh. And hopefully, as you kind of navigate that, maybe if you're a little bit lucky, you could start to feel a little bit of pride in waking up at 4:30 every day. You know, being grateful to yourself for working this hard, right? Even if pride isn't really there yet, maybe you can start with some gratitude, right? So like at least like hopefully your grades are getting better and you're starting to get in shape and things like that. And you can be grateful to yourself for putting in the effort.
Yeah, 100%. I totally want to do that.
Well, good luck to you, Josh. Any questions or last thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, on a completely unrelated note, I recently watched one of the videos that was posted on the YouTube channel, and it was about uh how change occurs, and that was just really insightful, and I want to keep applying that to the rest of my life too, so I can figure out how to learn and do all that and just improve, and it's just been really helpful.
Can you give us a
I love
TLDR on the video? I'm not actually that familiar with it.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. So basically, what it's about is like you read a Reddit post, which was a GIF of like basically this person saying, "Oh yeah, well I know darn well that I should be making change while they're watching your videos, but they're not able to, and they still don't do anything about it." And then you're like, "Yeah, well you technically don't really need to do anything about it, right? Because
Yeah.
you really just do the work in your head." And And I thought that was weird at first when I heard that, and then I kept watching them, and it was just really insightful then because then those suggestions you gave in that video about sitting on what you learned and reflecting on it, I actually did that when I walked into my backyard, like right after I finished the video, and it
Hey.
made me think about how I wanted to when I played Overwatch a few years ago, and I climbed to like the top elo or one of the top elos in the game. That's exactly what I did in order to get better at the game.
Yeah.
Like I watched VODs, I studied pro players and what they did and compared that to what I was doing. And I just I just got better at it and I improved on what I needed to get better at, even though I suck.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for jogging my memory. Yeah. So it's surprising how people don't realize that most of change is like internal, and we also don't really we don't really acknowledge that unless we like we can intentionally facilitate the process of change, which I think is also the same as learning, right? So if we kind of think about like if I'm stuck in the same pattern over and over and over again, I'll even use the phrase, "Oh, like why do I never learn?" And there are actually some interesting things you can do to facilitate learning. One of which is reflection. So thanks for sharing, and I'm glad that the video was able to help you. Good luck to you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, man. I love it.
Thanks, man.
It's an amazing place.
Thanks for contributing.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's just take a quick moment to recap, because I think there's a lot of stuff about Josh's situation that is actually quite applicable. So sometimes we have difficulty taking pride in stuff, which is kind of weird because we just sort of assume that everyone knows how to take pride in stuff, right? Like it's an emotion. So shouldn't everyone be capable of feeling pride? The interesting thing is that some of us actually grow up in a situation where, based on how certain behaviors are reinforced, what kind of feedback we get, it's actually like very hard to take pride in your accomplishments. And so there are a couple of key things that we can see from this situation. The first is sort of growing up as a gifted kid. Because if you grow up as a gifted kid, even if you excel, that is actually the bare minimum of what is expected of you, right? So it's kind of interesting because if we think about like performance, like if I perform at this level, or if this is the performance that's expected of me, and then I perform up here instead, this is the window that I can take pride in, right? Because like this is what I was expected to do, and I actually ended up way over here, so I should be proud of like overperforming. The interesting thing, so if we kind of think about it, if expectations are at the ceiling, right? If we're gifted and we're so intelligent and like, oh, like getting an A is so easy for us, then actually what happens is it's very hard for us to feel pride because expectations are so high. The best we can do is meet the minimum expectation. The interesting thing is that the other side of the coin is also present, where oftentimes gifted kids, not just gifted kids, but especially gifted kids, even when they do poorly, they're not, the shame they feel, the negativity they feel is oftentimes swept under the rug. And so like, instead of your parents telling you, oh, that was really hard for you, you know, like, oh, like it sounded like that, you know, you really struggled there. Sometimes what'll happen is parents don't want to be negative towards their kids. So they'll try to be reassuring. So when I'm reassuring, I'll say things like, oh, like you'll be fine next time. Don't worry about it. You got a B. I'm sure you're going to get an A. It's no big deal. You're smart. You'll figure it out. The interesting thing about that kind of reassurance is that it's actually invalidating. Because in that moment, when the kid really, really struggled to study and wound up with a B, or maybe they did study and they studied very hard and they still got a B. Instead of acknowledging that struggle, what we do is we kind of sweep it away, right? Oh, everything will be fine. And interestingly enough, by invalidating the struggles that gifted kids actually face, we don't give them an opportunity to like improve and triumph. Because even if they struggled and got a B, and I say, oh, it's totally fine, you'll get an A, it's not a big deal. And then if they study twice as hard and they get an A, is it a big deal? Have you progressed? Have you done a better job? Is this something to be proud of? Oh, no. These are just the expectations. So interestingly enough, the inability for some people's lack of experiencing kind of like validation when they struggle also makes it hard for them to feel pride. Because if I say to you, oh, that was actually really hard, you know, I know you struggled a lot. I really hope you can try again. And like, I'm going to try to help you. And I know it's going to be tough, but I believe that you can do it. And when we acknowledge the struggle and then when they improve, things actually change, right? Because then I can take pride in it. But by sweeping the difficulties that some people face under the rug, like we sort of take away their ability to like grow and triumph and take pride in that. And so oddly enough, sometimes we don't really know how to feel pride. And the last thing to consider when it comes to not knowing how to feel pride is if this stuff has happened to you, think about the expectations you place on yourself. Because if you internalize those expectations, then even doing a good job is not pride-worthy. Doing a good job is the minimum. The only thing that you can take pride in is if you did exceptionally well, right? Because that's what you expect from yourself. You expect from yourself the absolute best. And so very, very relatable, very, very common issue, surprisingly. And like more and more people experience this, but then we sort of like don't even recognize for a moment that pride is something that we learn how to feel in our upbringing based on certain experiences that we have. And if you haven't had those experiences, if your difficulties were swept away, if your expectations were really, really high, sometimes we end up with young adults or adults who actually like kind of don't know how to feel pride, even when they do a good job. So thanks a lot to Josh for calling in, and let's move on. Hello.
Hey. Hello, Dr. K.
Hello. What do you go by, friend?
I go by Honey.
Honey. Nice to meet you, Honey.
Yes, Honey.
And what are you working on nowadays, Honey?
Thank you. Well, the reason I wrote today is because I want to stop having the fear of losing everything I've gained. Just for yeah, sounds terrible, and maybe it is. We'll see.
Sounds scary.
The thing is, yeah, it is. Well, I've had made many improvements on my life. When I was a teenager, I had a very a great problem with social anxiety. I couldn't even talk to people, and then I worked hard through it. When I met my boyfriend, I started to improve, and then I saw this community, and well, that gave me a big push too. And I have a great job. I have a great life, and I have worked so hard for everything, and I'm very, very happy with my life. I'm in a moment that I think even when I have new problems, I know how to work through them and try to improve. But sometimes I get scared. I lose some things. This happens in different ways. For example, this morning I woke up. I was kind of half asleep, and then I felt a pump on my arm, and I was like, oh no, maybe I have cancer. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's not cancer. It's just a mosquito bite. And then my brain goes like, well, you don't have cancer, but what about your boyfriend? Does he has cancer? And I'm like, no, brain, no one has cancer. Let's just stop. This doesn't make sense. And then I move on with my day, and sometimes it's that easy to just move on. But some other days, especially when I'm working, when I'm doing good at work, I start to think on what if I can complete the next assignment? What if the people who trust me at work stop trusting in me? And I understand that sometimes these are just thoughts, and this is not reality. This is not what it's really happening. And when I think about it, I know this comes from for how my parents raised me, but still I can find a way to stop having these thoughts. They just happen randomly. I can go some days without it, and then one day it happens. So I think I'm lost. I don't know what to do with it.
So here's what I'm hearing, Honey. I'm hearing that you struggled with social anxiety. You put in a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and a lot of time. And through a lot of your hard work, you've managed to develop, it sounds like you're in a healthy romantic relationship. It sounds like you have friends. It sounds like you have a job that you're proud of. It sounds like you have a lot to be grateful for, and that you've worked really hard to build a pretty good life.
Exactly. I did.
And what I'm hearing is that despite that, so instead of all of this progress making you feel more comfortable, confident, and reassured, what you're noticing is that sometimes your mind still is like worried that it's all going to come falling apart.
Yes, exactly. That's I have great triggers also with money. Like, oh, what if there's a big problem in your country, and then I don't know, the economy falls, and then you lose your money, and like, well, I can control that. That doesn't really matter if that ever happens. But yeah, my mind does all kind of thoughts in different directions, like sickness, money, things like that. It's like I think it's like you said. It's just I feel like I'm going to lose things, and I can really enjoy what I have.
Okay, that sounds terrifying, right? Because like you said, it's like it's one thing to work hard for stuff, but then the whole point of working hard is that then you get to enjoy it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so
Exactly.
it sucks to work hard and not be
Yes,
able to enjoy
that's
it
very
because your
much.
brain is like, hey, by the way, if you're at vacation this week, what if like your house gets swallowed in an earthquake?
Yeah,
You know.
that
So
does can happen.
let me
Yeah.
ask you a couple of questions, honey. You said you know that you know where this comes from. It has something to do with your parents. Can you explain that?
Yes. Well, the first thing is about death. My parents usually had very they are very controlling using their own health about it. So, for example, when I was a kid, I have a sister. They told us things like, "We don't have enough time, and someday we were going to die. See how old I'm getting." It was too much that when we were 10 years old and my sister 11, one day they went to a party and we stayed at home, and we were Catholic at that time, and we started praying because we thought my parents may die in an accident when they came back from their party. And also my father used to say many things like, "Oh, if I lose this job, I'll lose everything. I owe everything I am to this company." And logically, I know that that wasn't true. And for me, I don't have exactly attachment to companies because I remember my father saying that all the time, and I knew that wasn't true. But it makes me feel like small things can make everything fall apart.
Okay.
And my father was always, yeah, talking about money and how little he had, but he really didn't have. That wasn't true. My father made very good income. We even went on vacation to an expensive place, and it was fine. But my father refused to give us money because he said we didn't have any. So that was also like this confusion of knowing that my father had money, but then saying he doesn't. And as an adult that I understand how much he made, that I understand that that made no sense, and it was just a way to not give us any money to my sister and me. So I think that confusion of having a lot of money in your house, but in practice in wanted to do stuff and buy stuff, you don't have any. That's, I think that confusion makes me think that having a lot of money doesn't mean you won't be living like a poor person.
Okay.
I think
That's
that's what I've seen.
very insightful, honey. So let me ask you, have you ever seen a
Thank you.
mental health professional, honey?
I seen one when I was a teenager because my parents couldn't make me have any friends and they didn't know what to do with me. But I think it helped me to be able to do some stuff like to mimic being able to not have social anxiety, but that didn't fix it. I was just terrified inside and doing stuff on the outside. And but after that, since that experience was like that for me, I didn't understand anything about myself or why I was so anxious all the time. I didn't try it again.
Okay. So, is it okay if I share some thoughts with you?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, I just want to commend you on how hard you've worked and also how insightful you are. Because it sounds like
Thank you.
I think you're
Appreciate
making
it.
it easy for me, and I think you've done a lot of thinking about this already, which helps a ton. So let's start with this. So I think you should
Awesome.
definitely consider getting a clinical evaluation. Because you may
Okay.
have something like we don't really know, but so you may have a real anxiety disorder, and that's the kind of thing where
Oh, wow.
that's where once you get diagnosed with it and you get treated for it, like in 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, you may feel completely differently. Like you may feel substantially better, like if you
Okay.
actually get like clinical treatment for it. So that's definitely something that I want you to consider. I don't know if you do or you don't. We're still going to talk about sort of the things that we do in the HG way, which is we're going to sort of explain how your mind works and things like that. But I want to make it clear that you may get a lot of benefit out of actually clinical evaluation and treatment. With me so far?
Okay.
So just
Yes.
something to
Yes.
consider, okay? Especially when
Okay.
you're kind of
Yes, makes
talking
sense.
about it seems like you're not worried about a thing. It seems like your mind is almost always worried and just picks different things to be worried about.
Yes.
Does that
Yes,
make
that's
sense?
it.
So it's almost like
Yes,
the
makes
worry
sense.
is like independent of the problem. Like today, the
Yes.
worry is going to pick this. And tomorrow, the worry is going to pick this. And the next day, there's a bump on my arm. I guess we're worrying about cancer today. There's no bump on my arm. What else can we be worried about? Oh, I know we can be worried about the economy. If we're not worried about the economy
Yeah.
today, I know we can be worried about our boyfriend. Right?
Yeah.
So let's start
sounds like it.
with this. So you were taught to be afraid, right?
Yes.
So normally
Yes.
so let's forget about your upbringing for a second. If
Okay.
I'm afraid of something and nothing bad happens, what happens to my fear? This may be a hard
Well,
question for you,
I-
but we're going to go.
Yeah, it's very hard for me. It's actually hard for me.
Okay.
Sometimes I would say go away, but sometimes it just comes back later.
Great. So I know that's hard for you. So the answer is if you're
Yeah.
raised in a normal environment, it goes away, right? So like if I'm worried about
Yeah.
a snake being in my toilet, and apologies to everyone out there who now is going to be worried about that. And I walk inside and I don't see a snake in my toilet, that fear will go away, right? So generally speaking, if we think about the human brain, if I'm afraid of something and it happens, that reinforces the fear. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, makes sense.
And if I'm afraid of something and it doesn't happen, then that reduces the fear. The fear goes down. I know it may not be that way for you, but does that make sense in general?
Yes. Yes, makes sense.
Now, it sounds like you grew up in a really, really tricky situation where there was plenty of fear that was disconnected from reality,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So your dad is like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. Let's go on vacation to a fancy place because we actually have plenty of money. So
Yes.
what your mind actually learns, so I've seen this a lot, and there's actually studies that show that if you have a parent with an anxiety disorder, we have no idea whether your dad actually has an anxiety disorder or not. We don't know whether you have an anxiety disorder or not. But there are studies that show if you have a parent who has an anxiety problem and you have a child who has an anxiety problem, providing treatment to the parent reduces the child's anxiety. So if you give a parent anti-anxiety medication, the effect you see in the child is the same as if you were to medicate the child. So the benefit that a child gets from medication, you don't even have to give the child the medication. You just give the parent the medication, and the child improves by the same amount. And so we know that there's a very, very strong relationship between parental anxiety and the child's anxiety. And essentially, I think what happened with you is that despite being reassured, you were still told to be afraid. So what's happened is your fear, even though you had nothing to worry about, your dad was still worrying, which means that your brain learned that reassurance has no impact on the fear. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes much sense.
So normal people, I'm afraid. And if nothing happens, I feel better. But what happened in your situation is you were taught that no matter how good things look, you should still be afraid. Even if we have plenty of money, it could be gone tomorrow. And so what's happened now is that in situations where I've seen people like this, I mean, we're not 100% sure if this is what's going on with you, but may fit, is that the fear has become completely divorced from reality.
Yes.
Right? Because you're not like reassured because like there was nothing to worry about and your dad was like, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And your brain is looking around and you're like, I'm confused. What am I supposed to be afraid of? There's nothing to be afraid of. And your dad is like, no, you have to be afraid. And then you were like, wait, but if there's reassuring stuff and I should still be afraid, that disconnects reality from my fear. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, makes so much sense.
And then what happens with your dad is like someone in chat said this, and I was going to say the same thing. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Have you heard that phrase before?
Yes, and that's how it feels like for
right?
me.
So what you've learned is that no
Yes.
matter how much reassuring stuff you get in life, everything could go wrong at a moment's notice. And so that
Yes.
fear almost becomes independent. And now the confusing thing is the fear doesn't know what to stick onto, because everything in your life seems to be going pretty well. You got a nice boyfriend, you got a nice job, you're doing better, you're social, you're living your life, and there's so much fun. And then the fear is sitting there and it's confused. And it's like, wait, we have to be scared of something, because, and even though everything around us in reality is good, like we divorced ourselves from that a long time ago. And Dad taught us that going to a party, we better pray to God because they're going to die on the way home.
Yes.
Right? And so now that your mind is divorced from it, what it's doing is it's latching on to whatever it can find. Oh, there's a bump on your arm? Must be cancer. Whew, we found something to be scared of.
Yes, it's true.
So it's almost like
it makes so much sense.
It's like an automatic pattern in your mind where your fear is looking for something. Now, the tricky thing here is, okay, so what do we do about it? So the first question that I have for you is, have you noticed a change in how often or how intense the severe is over time?
Yes, since I've been with my boyfriend, he had a very nice upbringing and he's very secure in those things. He also, I used to get triggered when he spent his money at start, and right now that doesn't happen. But since I've been with him, it's been so much less. So much that this morning when the bomb thing happened, I was able to detach from it quickly. But before, we've been together for some years. So when we started dating, that thought would have been on my mind all day. And right now that doesn't happen. So it's seriously improving, and it's happening less, but still there.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's, I'm happy to hear that. And that's what I would expect, because here's the thing to understand. When your fear is separate from reality, you need something to feed it. And in your case, it sounds like your parental upbringing was like feeding your fear, right? And so what we tend to see oftentimes is that when kids grow up with a particular like inherited problem, not genetically, but like, when they grow up with something like this, the more they spend time in the real world and away from the paranoid parents, the less serious it becomes. So like now what's happening is you're getting like reality testing, right? So your brain is learning, oh, wait a minute, like we actually like don't need to be worried about that. And the more that you just sort of like live separately from your parents, and I'm happy to hear that, especially your boyfriend, it sounds like is a positive influence. That's also very common. But as basically as your brain has your own experiences, it'll naturally start to forget over time. So the one thing, if it's moving in the right direction, I'd say just be careful about how much time you spend with your parents, and like be careful about, spending time with people who are a little bit more grounded in reality. And the more that you sort of live your own life, like the better the fear will become. Okay? With me so far?
Yes. Yes, I think I'm with you so far. And also, I've been separated from my parents because what you say makes so much sense. Now I got to understand something I couldn't understand about myself. I was trying to distantiate from my parents for a long time, and I started to get very anxious when I thought on talking to them. And I think this may be part of it. Like that feeling that everything goes into chaos again when I talk to them.
Yep. Right. So like
I need to be careful
because you're, I mean, yeah. So I think you're going to kind of absorb their anxiety, which we oftentimes find some people are kind of like that, where they're like a little bit more absorbent. So another thing when you're ready, honey, is the other thing that you can try to do, this sometimes works. Have a conversation with your dad about his fear. And I know this sounds kind of weird because we're trying to keep distance from them, but sometimes it can actually be very, very eye-opening to be like really objective and calm and just listen to your dad talk about how irrational his fears are. right?
Okay.
Right? So like when you actually
Yes.
talk to him, you'll realize like, wow, this is incredibly crazy. And as your own brain matures and you're able to sort of like judge that, you may actually be able to like get distance from it in your own mind. Because as you talk to him, and you can sort of have like open-ended conversation, right? And you're not trying to be judgmental. You're just going to ask Dad, so Dad, when we were growing up, you seemed really concerned about money. Can you help me understand that? Why were you always so concerned about money? How long have you been concerned about money? So one thing that was kind of confusing for me, Dad, is that you were worried about money, but we actually like took a lot of really nice trips. We had a nice upbringing. Like, help me understand, because it seemed like in a lot of ways we were okay, but you always seemed worried about it. Can you help me understand that? And then the more that you kind of talk to him, what you'll start to see is like the irrational fears like coming out. Right? And you don't want to get sucked into that.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is that when you talk to your dad, if you're not careful, he'll slip into the same pattern of, oh, like, you have to be careful, honey. You have to be careful. You can't trust anyone. Everything is going to go. So you don't.
Yes.
So if you, but the interesting thing is if you start asking him about his life and his experience and his views, it's going to feel very different. Does that make sense? It's not going to be like the autopilot conversation.
It makes sense. Yes. Yes, I understand, because I talk to him and hear his fears, but it's like I'm running away from hearing it.
Exactly.
So this is the opposite, and that may be very
Yep,
good for
but
me.
the key thing is that you don't want to get swept up by his stuff, right? You want to try to control the conversation, and you want to listen. And as you listen to him, just be careful with what happens within you. If you feel yourself getting triggered and stuff like that, pull yourself away from the conversation. You may not be ready for it yet. But eventually what I'd love is if you could have a conversation where you can like hear him and also like be calm yourself, like don't get sucked into it, so that you can really kind of see like how hard this has been for him. And then you can even say things like, oh, Dad, it sounds like it's been very hard for you worrying all of these years. And I can see that you worry about us today too. That sounds really, really hard.
Okay.
And then he may start crying or whatever, like you never know. Right. And then like you're going to give him a hug, and then y'all will like, cry together, and then it's going to feel weird. But like hopefully at the end of it, both of y'all will feel better.
Being him, maybe he'll start screaming at the middle because he don't want to get more questions. That happens too.
Yeah. So that's why you want to be, so you then be extra careful, but you want to be like open-ended and non-judgmental. Right. So and like give it a shot.
Yes, I understand.
But I think, honey, just to kind of, recap. So the first thing I'd seriously consider getting a clinical evaluation. Second thing to kind of understand is that, essentially your mind, normally your mind thinks that fear is tied to reality and gets reinforced through what happens in the real world. The interesting thing is that despite the real world telling you, hey, everything is okay, everything is okay, everything is okay, it sounds like your parents really contradicted that. And they were like, no, it's not okay. You can't trust the world, honey. You can't trust the world. And the more that you started to do that, then what happens is your mind is like, okay, we can't trust the world in terms of like reassuring. So we've got to be scared no matter what. Nothing the world can do will ever put us at ease because we can't trust the world.
Yes. Yes, that's very accurate. How my parents are. Yes.
And so you carried some of that with you, but the good news is as we grow into adults and we form our own relationships and we learn our own lessons, as you keep on doing that, I think this problem will slowly get better and better and better. And the last thing, if you ever want to really do this, it can be a little bit more intense, is that you can have a conversation with your dad where you really listen to what he's saying, and then you judge for yourself like how irrational it sounds. And sometimes doing that can help you with your own irrational thoughts. And you can even sort of say, oh, there's the voice of my dad. It's not even my voice. This is the voice of my dad that I'm hearing within me. That's an echo from all the times he's talked to me in the past. And that can be quite healing to do.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. I could never thought of that. It's great. Thank you, Dr. K.
Of course. Good luck, honey.
Thank you, and thanks for all the work you've done. I've learned a lot from you, not just for myself, but to understand others
Great.
and be able to really listen and not try to guess what everyone's thinking. So thank you,
Good,
Dr. King.
smart.
Seriously.
Good luck to you, honey.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so let's do a quick recap. So the tricky thing is sometimes our mind has this part that's just always afraid. Is always afraid of the other shoe dropping. And it's kind of weird, right? Because normally, if we're afraid of something and it doesn't happen, we should calm down. Like when reality does not mirror our fears, we should be reassured. Oh, I'm afraid that, a meteor is going to fall out of the sky. And then a couple hours go by, no meteor falls out of the sky. And then I'm like, okay, whew, I don't need to worry. That's normally what should happen with a fear, right? Is that a fear will either be reinforced by reality, and then our brain learns, oh, wait, I do need to worry about this. Or our fear will be reassured by reality because the action doesn't happen, and then our mind is like, okay, we don't need to worry about that. Whew. The tricky thing is that sometimes our fears seem completely divorced from reality. And actually what can happen if we tunnel down into this, sometimes what we find is that early on, despite the fact that reality is reassuring you, you were taught to still be afraid, oftentimes by a parental figure. Someone in your life was like, you can't trust reality. You can't trust reality. You can't trust reality. And as you internalize that lesson, then you're kind of screwed because all of the fears that you have can never be reassured because the real world no longer like counteracts your fear. And so we carry this fear with us over and over and over again. And the weird thing about the fear is that since there's nothing to actually be afraid of, it kind of like looks for whatever it can find. So on a particular day, it'll be afraid of this. On another day, it'll be afraid of that. Oh, we've got a bump on our arm. Maybe it's cancer. Oh, no, it's a mosquito bite. So we're not worried about that anymore. Let me worry about something else. So it's like the fear exists as an emotion and is looking for a manifestation. And it finds whatever small signal it can in the real world and puts all of the emotional energy into that weird little signal. Oh, so-and-so didn't text me back. Maybe they had a heart attack. Oh my God. Right? That's what the fear does. So what do you do about this? The first thing to understand is that sometimes this is what a clinical anxiety disorder manifests as. So sometimes if it's focused on being sick and things like that, we call that illness anxiety disorder. Sometimes it can also be generalized anxiety disorder, where we sort of think about people as worriers, right? So they worry about all kinds of different stuff. That's why we call it generalized anxiety disorder. It's not focal on a particular area. So it's worth getting clinically evaluated if this kind of like falls into your experience. And the other thing to kind of recognize is that like over time, you have to be really careful about what influences taught you that reality and fear are like two completely separate things. And ideally, as you start to live life a little bit, form additional relationships, have additional experiences, your brain can start to learn, oh, it actually turns out that reality and fear is connected. And the more that you can sort of connect those, the more, oddly enough, the fear will actually go down. So great call. Let's move on. Tech teller, next.
How many more are we looking to do?
Maybe one more? Maybe two?
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, friend.
Yeah, hi.
What do you go by?
Yeah, my name is Muhammad.
Hamad? Nice to meet you, Hamad.
Muhammad. With an M, sorry. Muhammad.
Hamad.
No, Muhammad with an M first. M-O.
Oh, Muhammad.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. Prompt was well, I kind of worded it badly because I was like in a hurry while I was writing it.
That's all good.
I want to improve my ability to trust and let others that are close to me help me instead of like relying on people that I barely know sometimes. Because I stop myself from like asking my friends. Like I see myself sometimes asking people that I'm not close to that much personal stuff and talking about personal stuff because I feel like I have no fear of the outcome that might come of this, because if I do with these people that I'm not familiar with, then it might end up like, okay, if they don't like it, for example, I don't know these people that much. I'm not that close to them. I don't really care about what they feel. Huh? But recently, and I'd say 2020 is when I first, I would say, like, I'm 21, by the way. Is when I first got friends that feel like genuine friends.
Good for you.
Yeah. And because like all of my time in school, most of my friends felt like, just talk about whatever you're interested in and that's it. Video games, shows, and all of that. But recently I've met these friends, and I was kind of at first shocked because I'm not used to these kind of, friendships that actually have people that care about each other and will talk about each other. And I guess that part of me kind of felt weird and at first maybe a bit distant. Because I went to an all boys school, so if I did end up talking about myself, then I most likely would have gotten like made fun of a lot.
Sure.
So it would have made it a bit harder for me to like open up. So the idea of it was like not that much, but for me, I kind of feel like if I do open up to my friends, considering I do like listening, like I do like when they show trust in me to tell me about their problems, their personal issues. And I'm like always, willing to help or listen to them whenever they need to. But for some reason, I can't trust myself to talk to them about my own problems.
Okay. So let me just make sure I understand you, Mohammed.
Yes.
So it sounds like you went to an all boys school. Sharing emotional or personal things in that environment is a very fast way to get bullied and made fun of.
Yeah.
And punished. So it sounds like early on you kind of learned how to become a private person.
Yeah.
Fair so far?
Yes.
And you've recently made a group of friends. So you had friends at that school and stuff like that, but the friendships you've had felt shallow. So you'll talk about TV shows, you'll talk about games, things like that, but you wouldn't have like serious talk.
Yeah.
And recently you've made... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just like if it's serious talk, it's like maybe serious general talk, but nothing too personal.
Got it. And so recently you've made a group of friends who you feel like are deeper friendships. You care about these people a lot. They also sometimes open up to you, and you're totally fine with that, and you treat them well, and it seems like that's healthy. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what you find that you're struggling with is opening up to them. And you can open up to strangers on the internet.
Yeah, basically.
Right? And so let's just try to understand that a little bit. What do you think it is that makes it easy for you to open up to strangers on the internet?
Well, with strangers, I'm not going to be interacting with them on a regular basis. So that interaction is most likely going to be that one of the only interactions I'm going to be having with them. Or sometimes not even strangers. Like sometimes one time they introduced me to a friend of theirs, and he seemed like a cool guy. And one time we ended up in a call on Discord, like just me and him, and we ended up talking about a lot of personal stuff between each other. Just all of a sudden, we started opening up to each other, even though this is like our third time meeting each other. And then maybe I talked to him a couple of times after that, and then I haven't really talked to him much again.
So how do you feel about not talking to him again?
I don't see it as a big deal because I didn't really connect with him as much.
Yeah. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, it sounds to me like some of these other relationships that you have feel very safe.
Yeah.
And if I were to tell you, okay, so Mohammed, For your close friends, tell them something very personal today. If I were to ask you to do that, how would you react to that? What would you feel if I said, okay, why don't you just talk to someone today?
Can I just clarify something?
Yeah.
I can talk to them. Like today, I've even had a chat with a friend about that I am going through a lot of issues, especially when it comes to trust. I am willing to talk that I do have issues and problems, but I'm not willing to delve deep into them.
Yeah. So if you think about delving deep into them, then what does your mind do? Like, how does it react at the thought of sharing something deep with with one of your friends?
Well, it's weird because I kind of because I kind of have a lot of free time. I'm a college student, so I either study or have nothing else to do, basically. And I always end up like pacing around my room, thinking back on what I'm doing. Why am I doing certain things? Why am I acting certain way? So I do a lot of like self-reflection on myself.
Okay.
And one of the things I've realized is that in this case, I'm a hypocrite. Because I allow them to talk to me because I don't see any problem with it. But I feel like if I go to them with my problem, I'm burdening them with problems that they don't need to deal with.
Okay. So I'm hearing that you feel some amount of guilt by burdening them because you care about these people. What else do you notice in there?
It's a combination of guilt and also just my mind kind of. I think this is just like maybe an excuse my mind is kind of telling me, which is that if I do tell them, they might not be able to help me with it. So I might end up making them feel like maybe shit if they can't help me with it, and all they can do is just listen.
Okay. So it sounds like you're afraid that telling them is going to make them feel bad if they can't help you.
Yes.
Are you afraid of what they will think about you if you tell them this stuff?
Well, I used to be, but I have opened up to some of them a couple of times. I have opened up a couple of times, but usually, even though they reassured me and they have made, like, they kind of proven me wrong in the sense of, no, they are understanding people. They will understand what I have to say. And they will understand, even if I have a very outrageous feeling, they will understand that, it's a feeling that I'm having. My mind always, the moment I end this conversation, goes back into I shouldn't have done that. I've made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that.
Okay, and what is the mistake that you made? Why does your mind think that you made a mistake?
It's weird because I can't really pinpoint it. It's like the points I said before, like I don't like I just put this problem now on their head. Now I might like I don't know. It might stay on their conscious for a while and maybe ruin their day possibly.
Okay, so that sounds like those thoughts are coming from a feeling of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I guess so.
So Muhammad, I'm gonna share a couple thoughts with you. Is that okay?
Yes.
So the first thing is that I want to share with you that I'm actually optimistic for you. So I think the key thing is not whether you have trust issues or not, but how you approach having trust issues. And so what I'm hearing from you is that you're a thoughtful dude. You spend a lot of time kind of thinking about this stuff. You also are very observant, right? So you recognize, okay, I can talk about this with some people. I can't talk about this with other people. You're kind of aware of what you're thinking. And ultimately, like, that's what leads to good outcomes, is sort of focusing on a problem, being aware of a problem. The people who really struggle with trust issues are the ones who don't realize they have trust issues and don't try to fix them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to teach you a particular technique, okay? And then we'll talk about a couple of more general things. So actually, let's start with the general stuff. So the first thing to understand is that actually you're not alone with discussing intimate things with strangers on the internet, or even like friends in real life that you don't know well. So we know from basically like a lot of psychological research that the closer we are with someone, the more their opinion of us matters, right? I want my friends to like me. I want my friends to respect me. I want my friends to think I care about them. And so interestingly enough, what we tend to find is that when there's a stranger, sometimes you can have the deepest conversations because it's safer. Because after this conversation is over, I never have to see this person again. So I don't have to damage I don't have to risk damaging the relationship by sharing something deeply personal with someone. Does that make sense? So you're not alone in this. This is also part of the reason actually that we even have things like group coaching, because what we've sort of found is that creating a space where no one knows each other, that you can work on your problems, actually gives you the most authentic and safe space to work on them. Because the problem is with something like a friendship, or if you're talking to your boss or you're talking to your brother and you're trying to get support from them, all of those kinds of things, any conversation you have with that person is going to affect your relationship with that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so what we actually try to do is create a relationship that's artificial. And this is where sometimes people in group coaching get upset, because we have certain rules in coaching, which is that you're not allowed to do anything outside of coaching. So no playing games together, no like hanging out on individual calls. And sometimes, we can't control people's behavior, but people seem really perplexed by that. And they're like, wait, why can't, like, I know these people, we all get along so well. Like, why can't we play games together if we both like games? And that's because we want to preserve this kind of like safe relationship. And the second that you become friends with someone in group coaching and then you start doing other stuff, then it turns into like your situation, which is that now I care about what this person thinks. There's all kinds of other problems. Like if we play together and I feed, and next week we're like, meeting, and then like there's resentment left over from the game because I was feeding and throwing and all that kind of stuff. It messes up the work that we're trying to do. So that's a different issue. But so the first thing that I kind of want to point out to you is that it's very normal to like feel more comfortable with people that you don't have good relationships with. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next thing is that what I'm going to recommend that you do with your friends is do a technique that we teach people in group coaching called going meta. Okay? So there's this very interesting principle, which is that if something is emotionally charged, there's a lot of emotion, and I try to talk about something, the emotion can make it hard to talk about. But what I can do is go meta, go one level above it, and talk about why it's hard to talk about. So for example, if I'm working with a patient who has trauma, and the trauma is too difficult to talk about, I don't want to talk about the trauma. I don't want to force them to talk about the trauma. But what I can do is I can ask them, what makes it hard for you to talk about trauma? Does that make sense? I'm not asking them to talk about the trauma. I'm saying, what makes it hard for you to talk about the trauma? And so the interesting thing is that if the trauma and emotion is down here, and then we move up one layer and we're saying, okay, what about this trauma is difficult for us to talk about? Then that's actually easier to talk about. And so interestingly enough, what I would recommend that you do with your friends is instead of telling them personal things, if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, have a conversation with them about having personal conversations. So you could go to your friends. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
because I almost do this, what you were saying. I kind of do it to an extent where I would talk to them about, I have this problem. I don't really like going into the details of it. And I would explain that, I don't like going to these details because they leave me into feeling a certain way. So I don't really go further than that, like when I talk to them.
Yeah, so that's where I would, perfect, right? So that's a good example of going meta. So I would encourage you to do it in a slightly different way, or like move one step further and just have a conversation about having conversations. And sort of ask your friends, hey, like, a couple of weeks ago when you mentioned this to me, how did you feel sharing that personal thing with me? Because I felt like trusted by you. I hope I was able to help you. One thing that I sometimes struggle with is that I'm sometimes afraid. So instead of telling them your problem and burdening them and making them feel guilty, what you can do is tell them about your fear of burdening them. Right? So instead of talking about the issue, you can say, sometimes I hesitate to share things with you because I'm afraid that if I tell you and you can't help me, like you'll feel like inadequate. What do you think about that? right? Then I would ask them that's I'm not asking you. That's part of the conversation. So sometimes I hesitate to tell you things because I'm afraid that telling you will make you feel guilty if you can't help me. What do you think about that? Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but I think my problem is that, like for example, I realized this mostly in school. For example, is that in 1 year I would act a certain way, and the more time goes on, the more you develop and your personality changes. So I would not show that change in personality until the next year, where I had this break where nobody sees me.
What?
And so like for example, the school breaks.
Uh-huh.
I will only showcase my changes after school breaks, because for some reason I don't like the reaction of people realizing that I'm changing. It's kind of hard to explain. Where it's like I don't ever since I joined this group, I've acted a certain way, and now I'm changing. But a part of me does not want to show this change in me.
Okay.
Like for example,
So
all of my
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, all of my friends, I used to be kind of known for a person who doesn't really compliment much, for example. But recently I kind of got used to being, more friendly and complimenting my friends. But the thing is with this group is for the first time, I never really had many female friends, but this group has females in it. And I feel like if I compliment them, then I'd be like, almost making a move on them, even though that's not my intention. And so then my mind kind of goes like, oh, I shouldn't be nice to them as much as, like, for example, the guy. I shouldn't be as like complimenting them as much. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh,
So
yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. What bothers you about your friends seeing you change?
that's mostly from my past. I always hated the reaction of people realizing that I changed. Like, oh, you're this now. And it's mostly like with family, for example. Like, I have 5 older siblings, and they're all used to me, being their youngest brother. And every time I would change in a certain way, they would point it out. They know, not necessarily in a bad way. They would just, oh, like, oh, now you do this. And for some reason, I don't know why, but a part of me just didn't like them pointing it out.
Huh. So I think, Muhammad, you're going to have to do a little bit more work there in terms of digging into what bothers you about people seeing you change. Do you have a sense of like what bothers you about it?
I guess that reaction usually ends up bringing attention towards me, and I don't want to have attention towards me like that.
Why not? What's wrong with having attention towards you?
I guess I just kind of like, it's weird. In some cases I feel like I thrive under attention when it comes to me showing off. Like maybe in a game I would play better if people are watching me, for example. But when it comes to social attention, for some reason I'm not much of a social person. I grew up as the youngest of 5, and I kind of always just not like, my parents kind of never really pushed me a lot. Like I kind of always say this to my friends, where I feel like my parents weren't prepared to raise a kid of my generation.
That unfortunately is too likely to be true.
Because all of my siblings aren't like 2 years older. The other youngest sibling I have is 6 years older than me. And to scale it up, I have another one who's 11 years, and then another one who's 12 years older, and then the oldest is 15 years older than me. So there's a huge gap between me and all of them.
So, Muhammad,
And I guess a part of me just felt like a kid all the time. I'm not like realizing that I'm actually growing up now.
and how does it feel to be growing up and them commenting on it?
In some cases, I enjoy it, and like I'm enjoying the fact that they're recognizing that I'm no longer the younger brother, the kid. And in some cases where it's like, I guess a part of it also comes from embarrassment. I don't know that like reaction kind of gets me embarrassed because it's like almost like a compliment. It can be, you know, that oh, they realize that you grew up, and I don't know, I don't react well with compliments.
Okay. So I think there's a lot here, Mohammed, but let's try to, can I offer some thoughts?
Yes.
Okay. Can I think for a second? Let me start there.
Yeah, it's okay.
Mohammed, I'm going to ask you a question real quick. Do you think that maybe the reason that you don't want people to see you changing is because you feel comfortable being a finished product when you put yourself on display?
Yes, I would actually say that because I recently even talked to my friend about this, where like for some reason I've started realizing a lot of the things that make me feel uncomfortable is basically variables in things when things are not set.
Okay. So let's unpack this a little bit, okay? So I've got some thoughts for you. So the first is that I want to point out to you that, so you're okay being in the public light, assuming you put yourself there.
Yeah.
Right? So you're okay with being on display, but the only Muhammad that people get to see is the one that you want to show them. You don't want them to see anything that you're not prepared to show them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, this ties into a couple of different things. The first is that, like, you're okay showing some random person on the internet the unpolished Muhammad. Right? Like, it's okay for them to see it. Because if they don't like what they see, or you feel embarrassed, or you talk too much, you can block them, you can never talk to them again. And this also kind of makes sense because if you're like, if you want to take a summer break or whatever, and then you come back and now you're complimenting everyone, that's okay because you've had enough time to figure out how to put yourself on display, how to compliment people properly. And then, like, you know, you don't want people to, how can I say this? It's like, you know, there's like uncooked, there's the pie when it goes into the oven, and then there's the pie that comes out of the oven. And the pie that comes out of the oven is like finished. It's beautiful. It's warm. It's golden brown on the top. Right?
Yeah.
And so you're okay kind of putting yourself on display, but you don't want to show anyone the unfinished product. Because I suspect, like, you're not happy with the unfinished product.
Yes, definitely.
Right? So now you've got a really interesting problem, because the interesting thing is, how can you learn to be happy with yourself if the only thing that you ever show people is the perfect version of you? Because then actually what happens is what they like is the perfect version of you, right? They don't like the real you. And so then you can't share your real problems with them. You can tell them, hey, I'm struggling a little bit. And then you can absolutely show them after you've worked through all your struggles and you figured everything out, and you're Muhammad, so strong and mature and adult. Then you can tell them all about the problems, right? When they're fixed.
Yeah.
So this is kind of tricky, because if you really, now that you have the opportunity for authentic friendships, what you're sort of noticing is that you have difficulty trusting people. But I think the reason you have difficulty trusting people is because you can't really, you don't feel very comfortable showing parts of yourself that are not polished. So I think the interesting thing, we're going to kind of go back to going meta, but I think what you've really got to do is, first of all, acknowledge a lot of these things, right? And this is also where, like,
can I add something?
Yeah.
Other than I don't want to show them the unpolished look of myself, a part of me really dislikes it when people like feel bad for me. like when people start feeling bad for me, it's like also it goes back to the guilt that you mentioned. I feel guilty that I made them feel bad for me, or like almost even petty to an extent, maybe like feel petty for me.
Yeah. What feels bad about that?
I don't know. I feel like feeling if they feel bad about me, then that's not a good feeling, and I made them feel not like I ruined whatever happiness maybe they had that day.
Okay. So let me ask you something. Is feeling bad for you an appropriate price to pay for friendship with you?
Well, that actually goes to another thing, because I do remember watching, not exactly which video, but one of your videos you mentioned, that there is a price for friendship, and your friends need to be there, and maybe not all the time, but at least when you need them. But for me, I guess because I'm used to my family is a loving family. They always support me with most of my like things, whatever I want. They always would support me. And I've always seen this love as, the love of the family that's unconditional. I don't need any reason to love my family. They're my family. They don't need a reason to love me. And so for me, it's kind of just translated into, okay, now we're talking about friends. I have no blood ties with them. I have no like life I've lived with them. So there needs to be a reasoning for why we're friends. And I feel like I don't provide a good enough reasoning for me to be their friends. For me, it doesn't make sense why they're friends with me.
And now we have the crux of the issue. So where did you start believing that you're not worth friendship with?
Well, with them, I started meeting a lot more people, more than what I'm usually used to. And
no, I mean,
I realized,
Mama, this sounds to me like you carried it with you into these relationships.
well, yeah, because like I said, I didn't have any, relationships in the past that felt like this. So I felt like when I came here, I started recognizing all of my past problems, and now they're kind of all like flooding in, where it's like I'm struggling on managing which one should I deal with. And I've realized a lot of the things, for example, I dislike about people are traits that I myself have, are traits that I like showcase.
Oh, 100%. That's all the time. We hate in other people. So the thing that we hate the second most in other people are the problems that we struggle with. The thing that we hate the most about other people are the problems that we struggle with that they've actually fixed. Right? So we hate the most the problems that we see in ourselves. And then the only people we hate more than that are the people that had our problems. And if I was a better person, I could be that. When we see a better version of ourselves in someone else who struggled with our problems but did better than we did, that creates so much hatred.
Yeah.
So, but Mohammed, so I think that this is still gonna, like, I'm trying to leave you with something a little bit practical here, but I think that a couple of things. So first is that what I'm noticing is that, like, so now I'm gonna go meta with you, right? So we have a certain problem, and then we start talking about it, and then as we come to something like a solution, you add an additional problem. And then we talk about that for a little while, and then we add something else. And we talk about that for a little while, and then we add something else. When I point this out to you, how does it make you feel?
I was actually scared of this exact problem happening when I joined this call, because I have been wanting to write on the Reddit at least, or like maybe on the server. But every time I write, I realize, okay, I'm linking a problem to another problem, and then I link it to something else, and so all I'm writing ends up looking like a jumbled mess of problems where it's like it's hard to read. So that part of me was kind of scared of when I was joining this call, because I knew I'm gonna start diverging into other problems.
And now that it's happened, how do you feel that your worst fears have come true?
It's not as bad as I thought, but like I still don't feel the greatest,
Okay. So I don't know if you can see my face on the Discord call or on the stream.
Yes.
So you look at my face. Do I seem upset that you've given me this whole host of problems?
No.
I'm not upset at all.
Yeah.
I think you're doing great. Is that confusing to you?
Well, I guess in this case, you're kind of like a professional at this, almost. So I guess I'm expecting you not to feel bad, I guess.
So this is interesting, right? So now you've got to be super careful because your worst fear happened and it's not as bad as you thought. But why isn't it as bad as you thought? It's not because you're actually like, because you're afraid that, oh my God, it's going to be a jumbled mess. And if it's a jumbled mess, then no one's going to make sense of it. Everyone's going to dislike it. It's not going to help anyone. It's going to be a complete mess. And now when I say it doesn't bother me, you do something very, very dangerous, Mohammed. You say, oh, it's because I'm a professional. It's not because it's not that your problem is actually okay. Do you see that? You're sort of like saying that the way you feel is because I'm a professional as opposed to it being okay that you did this. Does that make sense or no? Because if not, we got to stop and make sure. Like you see, because like you're actually like, this is a chance where I can look at your problems and I can say, Mohammed, it's okay to have these problems. You're a normal human being. I actually think they make a lot of sense. I don't think they're jumbled at all. But if you push what I say away by calling me a professional, then your complex will still continue.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it actually does.
So this is really important. This is exactly why you have self-esteem problems. Because anytime someone says, hey, Mohammed, it's okay for you to have this problem, what does your mind do?
I guess reject it.
100%. And what is the logic that your mind uses to reject me?
That you're a professional.
100%. Oh, it's Dr. K. Of course, he's okay with me being a jumbled mess, but the rest of the world won't be, so I can't share this with other people. And so now I think we're running into something that's very, very important, which is that anytime you actually start to connect with someone, you push them away.
Yeah.
Anytime someone has a chance to help you and say, actually, Mohammed, you don't make me feel guilty. Actually, when you share your problems with me, it doesn't ruin my day. What is your mind going to do when they say that?
Create like some sort of excuse to reject that thought.
100%. Right? You'll say, oh, they're just saying that to make me feel better.
Yeah.
They're not being honest with me.
Yeah.
Now,
I guess. One more problem like I've kind of had is that I've been wanting to go to therapy recently.
okay.
But my problem with therapy is that I'll be paying a lot of money to possibly find someone who's possibly good for me, who can possibly help me. And and this kind of problem is a bit more in my country, because all the people I know who have went to therapy in my country have gotten bad experiences from it.
Okay, so that's an important issue, and I'm not going to engage with it.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to restrain you a little bit. That's a whole other can of worms. And I think what your mind is doing, so like, why did you bring up therapy and how, oh my God, their therapy isn't good in my country? What happens if we start talking about that?
We'll ignore what we were talking about and go to another problem.
100%. And what were we talking about, Mohammed?
About how I keep doing that exact thing where I reject the solutions I'm getting. Right?
So that even this is a form of avoidance. So I think all your problems are related. Like, I don't think it's actually 1,000 problems. I think the problem is that when your mind gets seen, you're terrified of being seen. And if I see you here, right, and I say, oh, look, Mohammed, this is what you're doing. Your mind is like, oh, shit. This is not what we wanted to put on display. It's not well formed. We haven't figured out the perfect way to convey this on the internet. So let's talk about something else. Dodge, deflect. Yeah. And so you're doing fine, dude. This is all like super healthy and super good. I mean that. Does that make sense? Like,
A part of me, yeah, a part of me was scared that what I'm doing was not healthy, in the sense of thinking, self-reflecting as much as I did. Because I feel like I'm acknowledging a lot of the problems I've had, where I feel like I maybe didn't know about them and just was ignoring them because I wasn't aware of their existence.
So that too, Mohammed, is the same thing, because look at all the work that you're doing. What does your mind do with that work? When you introspect and you discover something, what does your mind say?
It's confused and just goes to something else.
Right? It says, oh my God, what if it doesn't actually help at all? It doubts you. There's constant doubt, right? This all comes back to the, like, because like there's some part of you that is not happy with who you are. And you're terrified that unless you put together the perfect display, everyone else will realize what you are.
Yeah, to add on what you said about the doubt, I keep thinking that I keep thinking about these problems, and when I think about them to my friends, I keep thinking that maybe my problems aren't that big of a deal. Maybe I'm just overthinking that these problems aren't actually big. I don't need to actually deal with them. A part of me kind of goes to that direction, but then a part of me gets scared about that, because it's like, what if I'm underestimating my problems?
Sure.
What if I do have a lot of problems?
Yeah, so that's where like you just like forget about what your mind actually says, Muhammad, and look at the direction that your mind's thoughts move you in. So here I am. I'm about to tell my close friend that I'm really struggling with something. And my mind is like, oh, like, what if it's actually not that big of a deal? And it's not that big of a deal. What direction is that moving me in? It's moving me away from connecting with my friend.
Yeah.
And your mind will generate whatever logic it needs to. The key thing is still going to be, it still comes down to like 2 or 3 very simple things. The first is what do you think about yourself? Are you happy with the person that you are? And my guess is that the answer is no. But I think that you think of yourself as a work in progress, which is 100% correct.
Yeah, definitely.
The challenge is,
especially recently, I've been planning a lot about my future.
Yeah, so
especially what I'm trying to do.
I don't think you have a traditional level of like low self-esteem, let's say, where you're beating yourself up all the time. But I just don't think you're okay not being perfect for your friends.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, you're never going to be perfect. In fact, the idea of being perfect is just a trick our mind uses to prevent us from like connecting with other people, right? It's actually like a trick. It's like we use the idea of perfection as a protection against rejection and bad outcomes. If I make the perfect dating profile, then someone won't reject me. If I turn myself into the perfect friend and then I can share something with my friends, they'll be okay with it. I won't be a burden. I won't be guilty. So we have this idea of if I'm perfect, then everything will be fine. And we go chasing that perfection, and it never comes. It's just another tactic.
I will say, yeah, I'm not a person who kind of believes in perfection.
Good.
I believe in doing the best I can.
Then why don't you talk to your friends?
I guess a part of me, because these friends, most of them are older than me as well. A few years older than me, but that few years can make a difference. Huh?
So what? If you, so you're telling me if you were a couple of years more older, you were further along in your self-development journey, then you would talk to them?
Well, no, I'm not saying that part. I'm saying that I feel like I'm seeing their problems, and then I'm comparing them to mine. I'm like, oh, mine is not that big of a deal. I don't need to talk to them about this. They have a bigger problem. That's the kind of logic my mind takes me to.
Yeah, and what direction is that logic taking you? Away from talking to them.
From the solution.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right. So this is my so I think the tricky thing here, Muhammad, is that you actually have grown a lot. You're very intelligent and you're very introspective. The problem is sometimes your intellect is hijacked by this part of you. And so all of your talent and all of your strength actually twists and turns, and it tricks you, but it just wants one thing, which is safety. And the one thing that it's going to do to feel safe is don't talk to your friends. Because if you talk to them, they'll see you for who you are. Since I'm such a toxic person, or my problems are so small, I'm going to infect them and ruin their day. Or my problems are so unsolvable. So like, which is it? Are your problems unsolvable because they're so big? Or are you going to ruin their day because they're so tiny and petty and irrelevant? Right? Like, it sounds kind of contradictory, but to your mind, it's like, I don't care. Either one is fine as long as we don't talk to them. As long as we don't talk to them, as long as we don't talk to them.
Yeah.
And
like a part of me was definitely the past few months have been trying to isolate myself from talking to friends.
sure.
Specifically,
Right.
like the past few months, I haven't seen any of them unless it was like someone's birthday. Then I would show up for the birthday, but other than that, I haven't been trying to do anything interactive with them. Only recently I tried to go back because I feel like it's maybe what I need, at least maybe not what I want right now, but maybe it's what I need to at least be around them for a while to get back into the mood of talking to them more.
Good. So, Mohammed, what I'm going to do, if it's okay, is I'm going to try to like summarize a little bit of like maybe how you can move forward. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's okay.
So the first thing that I want to let you know is be aware of what your mind is doing. Okay? It's not about right or wrong. You don't have to fix everything, but I want you to just notice like how slippery your mind can be. And don't worry about the logic that it uses. I want one part of your mind to pay attention to the direction that your mind is going in. Right? Is this making me move away from friends? And then you'll see, because as you notice that, oh, my mind is moving away from friendship, your mind will twist and turn and it'll give you a different argument. It'll abandon that argument right away. And it'll twist and turn, but the goal is always going to be the same, which is don't talk to your friends. So this is where I would still recommend to you very concretely that you go meta with them. And then you actually talk to them, not about your actual problems, but about your relationship. And you can ask them, hey, what is it like? If I were to share like some things that were challenging in my life, would that be okay? How would you feel about that? Here are some concerns that I have. So you don't have to share it right away. You can say, I'm afraid sometimes that like my problems will seem, it's kind of weird, will seem either too small and then like you'll feel like it's a waste of time, or they'll feel so big that you won't be able to help me, and then that in turn will make you feel bad.
Yeah.
Share that with them. Ask them, what do you think about that? Okay?
Can I ask something as well?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I can see logic where it would point me to the solution. I see like I can understand like what I should be doing to go to the solution, but my feelings kind of look the other way.
100%. Furthermore,
like I can see what needs to be done, but like my feelings tell me nope, go the other direction.
yes.
Or just don't do anything.
So that's where you've got to address the feelings. Right? And
how do I do that exactly?
Well, so let's focus on the conversation you're going to have with your friends, and then we'll talk about the feelings in a second, okay? So how do you feel about having that kind of conversation with your friends?
That kind of conversation I would be more okay with than directly sharing.
Okay, good.
What exactly are my thoughts?
So what you're going to do is you're going to talk to your friends about the rules of friendship and sharing. That will help you feel more safe in opening up to them. It's not going to happen overnight, but it'll definitely move in the right direction. Definitely. Okay? Now we move on to some of this stuff about feelings and things like that. So now I think the core issue here, like I said, is that something about you makes you very, very sensitive to being seen while you're not perfect. Right? So even for, like your family, as you were saying, as you were growing up and they're noticed, oh, like, look, you have a little mustache now. You're going to have to start shaving soon, right? It's a right of manhood that your older brothers are poking fun at you and you sort of recognize, okay, I'm growing up. So we just have to acknowledge that. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. If you do work with a therapist, I think it's not a bad idea. You can try to dig into that kind of stuff with them. I don't know what country you're from. I don't know anything about the quality of therapy in your country, so I can't really comment on that. And if therapy in your country is not very good, we apologize. We also, in a sense, try to help. So not, people who should be seeing it.
I've been considering online therapy. I've been considering it, but like I don't know which should I choose,
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that either. But I think it's not a bad idea. The key thing, though, that I'm getting, Mohammed, is that you're not comfortable in your own skin yet. You kind of feel like you're...
I definitely recognize that part.
Yeah. And so like all of the emotions and stuff are going to stem from that. And the key thing to understand, I don't know if you've seen our videos on Vedic psychology or if you watch Dr. K's guide, but that really explains it very well, where we sort of talk about the tricky thing is that your emotions want one thing, your logic wants another. And what we don't realize is sometimes our emotions hijack our logic and will create all kinds of justifications to keep us from doing things that are emotionally difficult. They'll basically be a logical excuse to avoid. And what are we avoiding?
Keep myself safe.
Yes. We're avoiding some kind of emotional discomfort. Oh,
or conflict even. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? So it could be conflict. It could be issues related to ego. And I'm not sure exactly, what to do there. I think it requires more than what we have time for on the call-in show. But I think that, like, at least to me, I think you've hopefully understood yourself a little bit better. And like the most important thing is not what the emotional issues are, but not to let your mind retreat from them. And
so I should like kind of stop it, catch it as it's trying to find a new excuse to diverge from the problem,
Absolutely. Right. And then what you really want to ask yourself is like, what is my mind trying to avoid? And try to look for an emotion that it's trying to avoid or a perception of yourself. So it's either going to try to avoid an emotion or people thinking something about you. It's going to be one of those two things. And as you find out, okay, like then the next question kind of becomes, all right, where did I learn to fear this thing? Where did I learn that if I share things with friends of mine, they'll start to think that I'm weak? And the more that you sort of follow that process, you'll follow it back to its root, and then hopefully you can deal with the core of the issue. That's what we call a samskar. You can address it in therapy too.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Any last questions or complications you want to throw in?
I can't think of any at the moment. So
oh
no.
My goodness! Look at that. Sorry, I realized that. Does that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable if I'm joking with you a bit too much?
No. Like, if I'm being honest, when it comes to anything emotional, I realize I get teary-eyed quickly, but I also end up chuckling a lot.
Good. That's
I laugh a lot through these times, and that's the only thing that kind of can keep me actually going in these conversations.
Good. So, Mohammed, first of all, bro, I'm super proud of you. I think you're doing awesome.
Thank you.
And I think that you don't have to be perfect to be okay. And this is what life is, right? It's just like one step at a time, my friend. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care. I think, Tech Teller, we're going to have to end because that ended up being longer than expected.
Sure.
So please extend my apologies to everyone in the waiting room. Man, I feel so bad. Like there's like 1,000 people in there. But yeah, it's challenging to try to balance like giving people the time they need and like making time for other people. Just to kind of summarize. So this is super tricky, but good. So sometimes we have difficulty connecting with people. And what we actually find ourselves doing is like being like we can open up to strangers on the internet, but we can't open up to our friends. And the challenge there is that if we kind of like look at it, it sort of makes sense, right? Because opening up to a stranger on the internet is safe. Because at the end of the conversation, if you said too much or you're afraid of what they think of you, you can just like retreat, right? And you can ghost them, block them, never talk to them again, let things fizzle out. But in real life, when it comes to opening up with friends, opening up with family, opening up with romantic partners, that's really tricky. Because if you open up to them, you have to live with it tomorrow. You have to see them again. So it's very natural for us to want to disclose things to strangers. It's a very well understood part of psychology. It's part of the reason that we have the restrictions that we have in our group coaching program, because we sort of recognize that if you want to authentically work on your problems, working on them with a friend always has a conflict of interest, because you have to maintain the relationship and work on your problems. And what if working on the problem actually negatively impacts the relationship. So that's why we try to create a very specific space in group coaching where people can authentically work on shared problems. That's also why sometimes people get upset, but we restrict things in group coaching. No playing video games together. No having conversations outside of group. Why is that? It's because it changes the relationship, introduces conflicts of interest. And sometimes people in group are really upset by that. They're like, I like these people so much. We've gotten to know each other so well. Why can't we have fun? That's exactly why. Because once you start having fun, the authenticity and the sacred space within group gets destroyed. There are 1,000 people on the internet, 10,000, 10 million people on the internet for you to play games with, not someone in group. Go find someone else. There are even people on our Discord. There are 80,000 people on our Discord server. You can play games with them, not people in group. Group is a sacred space for you to work on problems where you can be authentic and like work with a group of peers. So this is common for us to only want to connect to strangers on the internet. The issue is, what do we do about it? So now we had a fantastic caller who every time they try to talk about something, so first thing that we kind of notice is that as we start to dig into one problem, their mind adds something else. Oh, by the way, as soon as this is starting to take shape, let's add another variable. And as we start to work on that, let's add another variable. And as we start to work on that, let's add another variable. And so this is the sign of a slippery mind. And you may notice this yourself, that sometimes like when there's something you're afraid of, your mind will come up with whatever excuse it can to have you not do it. Oh, your problems are too big for them to handle. They're not going to be able to help you. You're going to make them feel guilty. Or your problems are too petty. This person is 4 years older than you. They've grown past all this kind of stuff. It's pathetic that you even have these problems and you're bothering this person. The end result is the same. Don't have the conversation. And where is that fear coming from? Because we want to project something to our friends, right? We want to be valuable as friends. We don't want to burden them. All kinds of other stuff comes in. The end of the day, if you're in this kind of situation where you're trying to figure out, okay, like, how do I develop trust with my real friends? How do I share these kinds of things? My concrete recommendation would be that you go meta. So this is a technique that we use in coaching a lot. It's also used in therapy. You can use it in it's useful for any kind of conflict resolution. So the idea of going meta is you don't talk about the thing, you don't address the thing, you talk about addressing the thing. So if I say, for example, I'm happy to talk about anything except for money. So instead of talking about money, what people can ask is you can ask, well, can you help me understand what is it about money that makes you not want to talk about it? Right? We're not going to talk about money, but just help me understand why you don't want to talk about money so that I can respect your boundaries. So in the case of a friendship, you can sort of ask them like, hey, like, how do we be, not how do we be friends, but what's okay to talk about in this friendship? So instead of sharing this particular thing, like, oh, I have these particular thoughts that I'm embarrassed about, instead of talking and sharing those thoughts, you can ask your friend, is it okay for me to share things with you that may seem petty? Sometimes I'm about to share something and I want to share something, but I'm afraid that it'll burden you, or I'm afraid that you'll think it's petty and insignificant. What do you think about that? So have a conversation about having a conversation. And the interesting thing is that the more that you go meta, the more that you move away from the emotions. So when you're talking about the issue itself, it's highly emotionally charged. Every time we play video games, you feed and you throw. Right? That's emotionally charged. Stop throwing. Hey, can we talk a little bit about how we play video games together? What's your approach to playing video games? What's my approach to playing video games? And so you can even go like meta. So you can even say like, oh, you don't want to talk about money? Like, can you please tell me why you don't want to talk about money? I don't want to talk about why I don't want to talk about money. Oh, that's totally fine. No problem. Can you tell me a little bit about what makes you reluctant to talk about the reasons that you don't want to talk about money? And each step away we get, the less emotionally charged it is, the easier it is to insert yourself into a healthy conversation. This is the tricky thing, is that when there's there's a charged emotional subject, we know we need to talk about it, but no one ever teaches us how do you like ease into the topic, right? Like, how do you ease into this? And so the way that you ease into it is that you go meta. So you go one level above where things are not quite as charged. And then you can go like Inception, like one layer deeper and then one layer deeper and then one layer deeper until you get to the core issue. Right, so I'll leave y'all with one last example. So let's say that I have a conflict with my wife. So we can address the conflict, or what we can do is talk about, like going to couples therapy to address the conflict, right? So like we don't want to address the conflict, but we can like do couples therapy. If we do couples therapy, like that's a separate conversation up here that will eventually get to down here. And then if my partner doesn't want to do couples therapy, then what I can do is have a conversation with them about, okay, if you don't want to do couples therapy, like help me understand why. Help me understand your perspective on couples therapy. Right? So you can like keep going until you reach a safe territory, because then you're so abstract that you don't even know what you're talking about anymore. And then you kind of want to like go one layer deeper, one layer deeper, one layer deeper. In terms of friendship, it's like, hey, like what is it safe for me to share with you about when we're friends? What can I talk to you about? I'm afraid that you're going to judge me a particular way. What do you think about that? Right? So you can talk about all that stuff and then ease into whatever the sensitive issue is. We also use this technique a lot when we're sort of coaching parents to work with their kids, especially around like healthy gaming habits and stuff like that, right? So like, if you don't want to talk about limiting your gaming, that's totally fine. Help me understand like what makes it hard for you to engage in that conversation. And then the child is like, well, every time we talk about it, you punish me. And then we're making progress, right? Because now we're talking about, okay, like, so every time we talk about it, you feel like you're getting punished. Thank you for sharing that. And now we can talk about, okay, how should we talk about video games without it immediately jumping to punishment? And once we solve that, then we can go to video games. Can you do that for someone who is defensive about their narcissism? 100%. It works the best with people like that. So let's say there's someone who's Skelly20 is asking. Let's say you've got someone who's narcissistic and they're very defensive. It works very good for people who are very defensive. So I can ask them, hey, by the way, did you take out the trash? And they're like, they get really upset, right? And then like, if you talk to them about taking out the trash, they're going to get more upset. You can say, I'm a little bit confused. Did I upset you in some way? Did I overstep? Help me understand what you're feeling right now. Like what did my words do to you? What makes it hard to have this conversation? And if you go meta like that, what did my words do to you? Oh, your words hurt me so much. It's actually like very like validating for someone who's narcissistic. Right? So you can sort of validate that kind of perspective. And then what you can sort of do is, okay, so like I'm a little bit confused. I'm just trying to figure out, actually that may trigger the narcissistic. What do you think we should do? So I would actually do this. What do you think we should do about, how should we communicate about whether the trash has been taken out? So just ask what questions, ask how questions. Don't bring I or you into it. Okay? All right. So we are 30 minutes over. So unfortunately, we're going to have to skip meditation today because I've got another thing right after this. Yeah. Couple of other things. We talked a little bit today about group coaching. But I just want to share with y'all, and we also heard from, unfortunately, Muhammad that, in his country, it sounds like there is not good mental health care. And unfortunately, like that's true for a lot of people. So this was something that I wanted to address, but didn't really get a chance to because I thought it would have derailed the conversation. Unfortunately, it's true that when we look at our mental health support structures, oftentimes they're too old, too expensive, or too slow. So in some countries, it sounds like there just really aren't good experiences with therapy. In some countries, like in the US, like mental health care is very, very expensive. and also like weeks and weeks, if not months and months, to get an appointment. And so there are some things that we definitely can't address outside of therapy. So if you have trauma, if you've got really bad anxiety, things like that, if you've got a clinical diagnosis, seeing a mental health professional is absolutely the right place to do it. At the same time, what we've tried to do in our coaching program is exactly address these needs. So we've had coaching clients from, I think, 71 or 72 countries at this point. And what we've found is that the challenges of the current generation are not necessarily addressed in therapy. So not everything is bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, like there may have been clinical components to it, but there's a ton of stuff just about how do I connect with friends? How do I open up to people? How do I build trust? How do I build relationships? How do I deal with my fear? These are all human experiences. And the interesting thing we also heard today is that my parents weren't ready to have a child of my generation. Because something is changing. The challenges that we face are actually rapidly evolving. And so what we've tried to do is get a group of people together, put them through a rigorous curriculum that sort of has, and they're peer support specialists, right? That's what coaches are. They're people of our generation who understand our problems. And then when you put them through some of this communication training and teach them some theory and things like that, what we end up with is people who are sort of like have a skill set that is scientifically valid, like motivational interviewing, mindfulness, etc., that is then targeted to be faster, more accessible, and will meet you where you're at. And if y'all are interested in that, you should definitely sign up for coaching. Sometimes it's unfortunate, but we do sometimes get people who I don't think are appropriate for coaching. These are people who are using coaching as a substitute for mental health services. And the right thing that we do in that situation is we'll usually refer them to mental health services in their area. And unfortunately, we've kind of seen that from some countries where there just isn't great access, but that's, you know, even, I don't know how to say this, but we can't fix the problem of a lack of access of real clinical resources in your area. That's not what our program is for. The key thing, though, is if you look at the Venn diagram of what you can address as a clinician and what you can address as a coach, there's a fair amount of overlap. What about online therapy? So the truth is I've heard a lot of mixed things, to be honest. So you know, we've had conversations with a lot of different online therapy providers. We just don't know yet, and we're kind of actively investigating like who's reliable and who's good. If y'all have experiences with online therapy that you know, HIPAA stuff aside, so don't post patient information, but if people in our community have had experiences and want to share that, like that would be very useful for us. But, you know, generally speaking, we just don't know because there's so much variability in like quality and stuff like that. Suggestions on rating, by the way. I'll do it. I will do it. Crit? We can rate crit. Cobalt Streak? Small streamer or crit? Y'all decide. Okay, crit it is. Crit? Okay, we'll raid crit. Take care, y'all. Sorry about not having time for meditation. I think I always struggle with like, should we like, you know, we don't want to cut people off. Anyway, we'll try to manage time a little bit better. Take care and send crit some love.